I shall do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now live.
Well, welcome to this virtual meeting of the Finance Committee. The meeting was supposed to start at 1800 hours. It is now 1808, so I do apologise. We have had some technical difficulties. If we could move on to the first item on the agenda, which is election of committee chairman and vice chairman for the mayoral year. So if we could receive nominations for chair of finance.
I'd like to nominate Jane James as chair.
Yeah, and I'll second that. Oh, Councillor Harvey, sorry, I'll second that.
Are there any other nominations? No, I'll take the silence as being a no then. Jane, I presume that means that you are elected chair. Can I have a seconder?
Agreed. Yeah, you had your seconder.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I'm already
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Unanimous.
Jane, if I can hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Alan. Okay, so we move on to the second part of that agenda item, which is to receive nominations and appoint Vice Chair of Finance Committee for 2020-21. Do I have any nominations, please?
I'd like to nominate
Could
Roy
I nominate?
I'll hold it one at a time.
Brenda started first. Sorry, Councillor Canham started first. So can I take your nomination, please?
Roy Brain, please.
And I believe that Councillor Hollis was making a nomination.
I'll second Brenda's nomination.
Are there any other nominations, please?
Yeah, can I nominate Councillor Brindle, same as last year, please?
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Is there a seconder for Councillor Brindle, please?
I'll second him. Dennis.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. So what we will now do is it's a straightforward vote between Councillor Brame and Councillor Brindle. Both nominations have received a proposer and seconder. So if that's okay, I will go through the list of the Finance Committee members and I will ask who you're voting for, please. Is that okay?
Yep.
Yep.
Super. So Councillor Brame, Councillor Brindle, sorry, frantically scribbling. So Councillor Brame is not in the room, I believe, so I'm unable to take his vote. Councillor Brindle, are you in the room? Am I able to take your vote? No. Councillor Burnett.
Yeah, I'm here. I vote for Roy Brain.
Thank you very much. Councillor Canham.
Roy Brain.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford.
Mike Brindle.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Mike Brindle, please.
Thank you. Councillor Hollis.
Councillor Brain.
Thank you. And the final councillor is myself, and I will vote for Councillor Brain. So that is, by my reckoning, 4 votes to 2. Are we in agreement with that, committee? I don't know if Chris Crimman is still in the room or took that vote, but that was 4 votes to Councillor Brain, 2 to Brindle. So Councillor Brain is duly nominated Vice Chair.
Hey.
Welcome aboard.
Mr. Chair, do I ask?
Do I say thank you to that? Sorry, I'm awfully late. Norfolk County Council decided to upgrade my computer and it, so can somebody tell me what I've missed, please?
You have missed the vote for Chair and Vice Chair. Councillor James has been installed as Chair and Councillor Brame has been installed as Vice Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For the record, Chris, I know obviously you'll play this back, but the vote for chairperson was unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Now I'm back. I just let you know the district nurse wasn't for me, all right?
Glad to hear it, Chris. Hope everything's well. If we may,
Yes, thank you.
may we move on to agenda item 6220. declarations of any disclosable pecuniary interest, to receive any additional interest not already registered. Is there anything that anybody needs to get off their chest this evening?
No.
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you all very much. Obviously, should anything arise during discussions, please feel free to make me aware of that. Okay, so if we move on to 6320, apologies for absence, please.
Can I ask, is Mike Brendel in the house, please? No, well, I haven't got any apologies. No apologies.
Okay, thank you. I know a few of us have experienced technical issues this evening in joining, so it may well be that the intent was there, but the technology was not willing. If we move on to 6420, we now start the plethora of paperwork that we've got to accompany this meeting, and I apologise in advance for it. 6420 is the minutes. To confirm as the minutes of the committee meeting held way back on the 18th of February 2020, it's received by full council on the 25th of February 2020 as a true record and to be signed and initialed by the chair. You've all had these in advance, so I'm going to make an assumption that you have read them. I will give you a moment or two to reacquaint yourselves with them. Are we happy with those, please?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
May I have a proposer and a seconder on that?
I
Move the
propose
minutes.
they are a true record.
Thank you. Chris, that is a seconder, please.
Yeah, I will.
I believe
Chris,
that
sorry,
was,
Chris.
that was Colin
Colin,
proposing.
Thank you, Colin. Got you. Got both things. Yeah.
Sorry. Haven't gone
What?
quackers.
Okay.
Hello, Doc.
Has anybody got the duck?
Exciting and interesting times. Can I ask if people do speak, if they can say their name beforehand? It is a little tricky. And then when we go to the open floor stuff, if we can follow the procedure that we seem to have had quite finely tuned last night at the special full council of putting hand up in the chat. I think I can see it all. I'm hoping I can. Feel free to wave at me.
Okay, Miss, fair enough.
Okay. So
You
if
want to see me wave?
well, no, won't. No, sorry. And is everybody happy that those minutes are a true and fair reflection?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any objections? To quote the mayor last night, silence is golden. So on to 6520, the committee financial decisions. That's the first of your major pack that we had. That's really just to note and to make yourselves aware. Any questions or queries, please, to the floor?
No, noted.
Okay. Is everybody happy that I move on from that agenda item?
Yes.
Jen's got her hand up.
Oh, Jen, sorry, apologies. Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, it's my first ever, in 6 years of being with the council, my first ever finance meeting. So bear with me, please. These contracts that am I on the right page?
We're still at committee financial decisions.
Right, okay then, I've moved somewhere then. Okay, thank you.
No, you're all right, not a problem. I'll note that you would like to speak on the tender procurement register when we get to that, which I believe is the next item. So we'll move on to 6620 if that's okay with the committee. Contracts update. The document is attached and thank you very much, Alan. So we have a copy of that and we have that all noted there. Councillor Hollis.
Thank you. I was just going to say these have all gone through the committees and been accepted by full council, etc., haven't they?
Correct.
I am right in thinking that, aren't I?
Yes.
Thank you.
So what we do is if there is an existing contract that's out at whatever stage it's at, we do have a note of it because it is part of the Finance Committee's remit to keep note of the contracts that are out there, because it forms part of Alan's work when it comes to the internal audit. That's often something that they look at. You may recall that last year and the year before, the leases were something that they particularly focused on. So it's just part of that sort of checks and measures that we're aware of it. And it's also a really good, useful tool for the officers in terms that we have that there and we can see what the duration is and when, if they are a rolling contract, when those things come up for renewal as well. So it supports that paperwork trail. Any other questions or queries on that document, please? Councillor Brame.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at both what we had sent to us and on here, the only bit that baffled me was awarded to toilets and ramp. It just says open, and having not been here before, I wasn't quite sure what that meant.
So well spotted, Councillor Brame. If you refer back to the previous document, which said the committee financial decisions from 2019-20 and 2020-21, at the very end of it, it states about the VEM committee in May, and agenda item 89719 states recommendation that for Town Council accept the tender for the changes to the Guildhall toilets to make the ramp safe and the display cases. As those minutes haven't been adopted and that hasn't been ratified by full council yet, we're unable to state who they're awarded to.
Does that mean it will be awarded to us?
No, that is who the contractor is that we award it to. So this is works that we ask people to do for us.
Thank you very much.
That's all right, no problem. Any other queries?
Jenny's got hands up.
Thank you, Councillor Hollis.
Thank you. I'm thinking that the internal improvements of the Guildhall have already started. So should we be aware of who the contractor is?
As I stated, the recommendation has not been approved by full council yet.
Right, okay, yeah, you did. Thank you.
Any other questions or queries, or are we happy to move on to our next agenda item, please, people?
Move on.
Move on. Move on.
Thank you. So I take you now to 6720, which is the financial report for the year ending the 31st of March. And this is to receive and approve the income and expenditure reports for the year end. And that's the little pack that we've received. So by the power of PowerPoint, we have the details that you've already had. Are there any questions, queries or comments arising from this, please? Councillor Brame.
Thank you, Chairman. It is purely a comment. I've been doing these things now by these things I mean chat or Zoom or whatever, and I must congratulate Alan. He's faster than anybody I have ever seen as an officer. He's actually getting it up on the screen that we're sharing faster than I can get it up on my iPad to go through just to check what we'd seen. And I think he ought to be congratulated. Thank you.
Congratulations, Alan.
There you go, Alan. High praise indeed.
Thank you.
So, are there any questions or queries? So we have the first covering page, I do need to make yourselves aware that we have just had a note from the town clerk that unfortunately Councillor Brindle is unable to get on. Thank you for following us on YouTube, Councillor Brindle. I'm so sorry. I'm hoping the town clerk is trying to assist you in terms of dialing in, and that you may join us and engage with part of the meeting at some stage. Fingers crossed. So we have the first page, which is the summary. I would draw your attention to the pieces that you've currently got on screen highlighted in red and the non-adjusting post-year events. Are there any questions on this at this time? Could we move on to the second page of that, please, Alan?
Chair, can I just say that Mike Brindle can't get on, so I've sent him the telephone link that has brought Colin Burdett to us, so let's keep our fingers crossed.
Excellent. We look forward. Obviously, I'll leave that with you to manage his access to the meeting, Chris. Is that okay?
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks.
Okay, so we then have the income summary, and I'm sure you'll join me in also thanking, and then the expenditure summary, thanking Alan for the narrative that accompanies this. It's something that I've been very keen to see over the last couple of years, because I felt that it's a way of interpreting the accounts that has helped me considerably, and often, you know, it's sort of a preemptive that the queries that we may have are already answered there.
Could I ask a question, please?
Of course, Councillor Cannon.
Grave digging, poor budget in a mix of cemetery income. What is poor budget?
Before you pick up on that, please, and I think we've got you coming through on both your tablet and your telephone, because we've got an echo thing going on at the moment.
I'll have a look.
It might be worth muting if you're doing it on your phone and you're actually visually on your tablet, it might be worth muting the tablet. And Alan, can I get you to sort of explain about the challenges that you've had within the budgeting and the mixture of income, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think what's happened quite extensively in previous years is that budgets were developed from previous budgets, and there wasn't necessarily a kind of realignment with actual. And I think in the case of the cemetery, I can't find the correlation between grave digging and the trends in grave digging with the trends in income. So I've had to jump to the conclusion that it is due to some, the mix of income hasn't been aligned with the expenditure that supports that. So I also have a feeling that if you look at the previous year's expenditure and then you look at the previous year's budget, there isn't a correlation between that, and that's what also resulted in me coming to the conclusion that the budget actually wasn't that realistic.
Okay, thank you. I'll talk to Roz. We'll sort it out.
I mean, what I would also say there is actually the actual expenditure is far less than what was actually budgeted. So there's a silver lining there. Councillor Brain, please.
Thank you, Chair. Having heard that response from Alan, do we need to have a group to look into, or do we need to ask him if he could look at all other things that are not quite how he would have expected, so that he has to make decisions from himself, should he bring them back to us so that we could look at them and say, it was never done right in the past, perhaps we can do it correctly in the future?
At risk of preempting the question and preempting what Alan might say, agenda item 7320, updating of the finance officer reforms, which has sort of become ultimately a standing agenda item since Alan came on board, has been highlighting exactly that. So Alan has been sharing his challenges with us, and when they're resolved, they tend to fall off of there. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, please, Alan?
No, Chair, but I think the one thing that we are going to do this year is we're actually going to do a review of our budget quite early on in the financial year, and that's another agenda item that we're coming to. And I think that that will actually assist us going forward, getting the base right. I am fairly confident that there's a better correlation in some of the committees between last year's expenditure and this year's budget. So I think we have started to kind of look at those differences. It's not right across the council, but there are a fair number of the committees where we have actually done that.
Chair, I can only apologise. Being new on the committee and coming back to it, I hadn't seen. It's amazing. You see something written on an agenda, but you don't quite see how it collates to what you're going to do. So had I have realised that, I would not have asked the question.
Not a problem at all. There is no such thing as a silly question. If we don't understand, we should always ask. And actually, I'd always rather be a fool for 5 minutes than remain a fool and not know the answer. So not that I'm calling you a fool, Councillor Brain. But yeah. Is that that was Councillor I thought it was Councillor Brindle had made it in. Apologies.
He's having trouble, so I might just get on the phone to him in a moment, but he's trying to get in.
That would be lovely to have him join us. Thank you, Chris. Councillor Hollis, I've got your hand up, please.
Yeah, like Councillor Brain, it's my first time on here. I was looking, I don't know if I've moved too quickly down my page, but we've got waste disposal costs, including the allotment clearing. I'm taking that's waste disposal for everything on the council, or is it for specific items?
Alan, would you ask?
We are changing that for this year, but in that year, that's what happened.
Right, thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Any other questions or queries on that? And what I would say is those are exactly the sort of questions that we need to be asking in the finance meeting. You know, what is that? I'm not entirely sure. Can you elaborate? Is absolutely perfect. So please don't ever think that you can't ask those questions. Councillor Hollis.
Yeah, sorry to be a bugbear. I'm looking at on mine legal and professional costs. Is that for the renting of the buildings, the leases of the buildings that we rent out, or what is that actually for? Because it's quite high, isn't it?
Alan, could you pick that up for me, please?
At the moment, particularly in the last year, we had a lot of professional services. A lot of our IT annual costs and support costs go into that particular line item. So that's really what's included in there. So it's not, there's very few legal fees. It's mostly professional fees in the form of IT support, software support, licenses, that type of thing.
Thank you. Can I come back on that, please, Chair?
Absolutely.
Would then, as it's IT support, etc., would that not be better up? I mean, I don't know. I'm not up on this, Alan, so I'm taking your guidance. Equipment support and maintenance, wouldn't that be? Should that not maybe join?
I think your observation is right. There probably is a little bit of technology cost sitting in equipment support and maintenance, and there's a lot of it sitting in legal and professional fees. But what I would like, if it's very easy to do, I would happy to send through an analysis of that to the committee members, and they can get a better idea of what's actually there. I can summarize it. I have a summary because I provide this type of information to the internal auditors.
Would that
lovely,
be
thank you.
fabulous? Has that helped, Councillor Hollis?
Yeah. Yes, yes, it has. Thank you.
Excellent. Before I move on to Councillor Brame, is there anything else, Councillor Hollis?
Let me ponder, Chair. Let me ponder.
I'll go to Councillor Brame to give you a chance. Councillor Brame, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to follow on from there, in as much as I see that you know, the budget is only 11.82. Did we get that wrong? Because you know, we are spending an awful lot on that. Is that something, again, that might come up in Alan's report later, but it just seems to me that this early in the year or wherever, we should be looking at that.
What I would say is this is obviously the year to date, as in the year ending the 31st of March.
Mike Brindle.
Hi, from
is now
thank
joining.
you. Good to have you.
Thank you, Mike.
Hi, thanks very much for those who helped me get on. But Jane, if you're hearing me, I've just been able to join now. I've been trying since well before 6, obviously. So a bit frustrated, but I'm here. Better late than never, I suppose.
Glad to have you aboard. Okay, Councillor Hollis, I think you've got a hand up again.
Yeah, sorry to be a bugbear. I've got here, I've got two questions in one hit, if that's all right, Chair.
Go for it.
One is the property maintenance. That seems quite high. Is that for all our properties for maintaining? That's question one. And question two, the toilets expenditure, expected rate rebates, which we haven't got, and I found that out again yesterday. What are, again, and cleaning contractors. So I'm concerned about the toilet expenditure, especially in present times, and also the property maintenance that seems fairly high. Thank you.
Alan, are you happy to pick up those points?
I am. In terms of toilets expenditure, most of that cost is relates to the contract. Previously, up until December, we were doing that in-house. Post December, we've actually had a contractor come in. So effectively, we've got a bigger saving in our salaries budget and a slight overspend on our toilet budget.
I'm not properly on the meeting.
Yeah. In respect to property maintenance, there's actually two sets of property maintenance, and it was actually quite confusing because we had two different committees looking at two different aspects of property maintenance. So the one that appears on the previous page on the 5,000 with the 5,100 code, that relates to our rented properties. So where our agents go out and they do a gas safety certificate, or they might repair something in a property that we rent out to a third party, those costs would go there, and all the other property maintenance would come here. So part of this budget was sitting in VEN and part of it was sitting in ALP. And just to help us from an accounting perspective, because it was very difficult for us to always work out where to place those costs, we've just consolidated it into the 5465 vote.
Can I come back, Chair, please?
Oh,
we'll
please.
get to manage next year.
So all in all, that actually makes sense that the inside and out, the properties concerned, which belong to two separate committees, is combined it would make sense to do that throughout, wouldn't it?
It would.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Alan.
Mike, is there anything you would like to add to the discussion conversation at all?
I'm in a difficult. Thanks very much for that. I appreciate that. At the moment, I'm only on the phone, so I have no visual connection with you, which means I can't, for example, put my hand up either on screen or on chat. So I'm a bit stuck, to be honest. So at the moment, I'd have to say I haven't caught up yet because, as I say, I'm just relying on the phone. So I have nothing on screen at all.
Okay, my apologies, Mike. We're on 6720, which is the financial report for the year ended 31st of March 2020, which obviously came out in the big 13 document email pack. So if that helps you sort of orientate, whilst
I may have missed other comments, unfortunately. The only comment I was going to make was to ask about where the current income exceeds the expected income. So there were two or three encouraging headings like that. So I don't know whether there's any particular reason that we need to refer to. That's my only comment at that stage.
you'll be really pleased, Mike, that nobody else has picked up on that yet. So
well, perhaps they didn't think it. Perhaps they were so pleased and overjoyed that they hadn't noticed it. I think there might be the reverse for them, perhaps, but certainly ALP looks good, and the other column looks good as well. I'm talking from memory, to be honest. I haven't got the paperwork in front of me either than on the screen. So I'm kind of a bit of a lame dog at the moment in this meeting, and I apologise to everybody for that. It's not actually my fault, but it's beyond our control at the moment.
no, thank you, Mike. What I would say is obviously that first page that you're referring to, where you've got the ALP and the VEM side of things. Obviously, the detail then comes in the attached reports, which gives the breakdown of those nominal codes. And there is some narrative there, or explanation, as Alan has referred to it. We have done quite well. I mean, bar fees are up, but then when we go back and look, bar costs have increased, because obviously the more you sell, the more you have to buy. So I think the VEM have explored that. Alan, is there anything else that you would particularly like to highlight in those terms at all?
No, I think the other area that we seem to do very well was around grants, which have been booked into the ALP budget, and that seems to be the work of the new countryside officer, so that's great. But I don't think that that's going to be recurring, and that point has come through when we were doing the budget, that we can't bank on that level of income coming through next year, so we just need to be conscious of that.
And that's obviously also including the Section 106 monies for Harriet Martineau and Castle Park, isn't it?
Correct.
Colin, being mindful that you are on dial-in as well, is there anything you would like to raise, query, comment upon, please?
No, I'm quite happy at the moment, thank you.
Okay, so I'll open the floor. Is there anybody else? Roy, do you have your hand up there? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, purely as a point of interest, which people may well know and I don't, not being used to this format of figures, I'm taking it that a minus is good and a plus is not so good. Normally, I would have been somebody that was looking for having things in either exclamation mark or the normal things for, double lines and things for negatives and positives. Anybody that doesn't do this sort of thing all the time may not know. And when you look at it and you see all of these negatives, I just wondered if that had been explained and I'd missed it. Thank you.
No, it hadn't, Ryan. Thank you very, very much. So on the income report, in terms of a negative, whether it's the budget variance, it's not are great. It means to say we thought we were going to get more money in than we thought we would. In terms of the expenditure, if there's a negative figure, it means to say we haven't spent as much as we thought we would. So looking on the screen now, in terms of 5100 salaries, the actual figure is considerably lower than the budgeted figure. So there's a budget variance which is lower. Would it assist councillors, do you think? And would it? And then the second question is, what's the impact in terms of producing the report in showing those negative variances in red? Would that be appropriate? Would that be useful?
Yeah, can I just say it would. Red, yeah.
Yeah, I must admit, Chair, for me, it would, you know, when we have to remember that most of us are not quite as expert as you and Alan, and something like that is, you know, it really looks, yeah. If you can see it and it's in red, it says, why is that in red? And we can ask the question. But when you see the minuses and things, you're not quite sure. As I said, I wasn't quite sure, because normally when I look at spreadsheets like this, they're in, and I can't even think of the name of, you know, quotation marks, and that tells me, oh, that shouldn't be there. So that was why I brought the question up. So in red, when it matters to us, I just think would be quite simple for people to look at.
Alan, what's the impact of that in terms of your workload in developing these reports?
It's not difficult at all, and I've already made a note of that comment, and I will ensure that it appears in future reports.
Fantastic. Anything that makes everything more accessible for everyone, which means to say we understand where our money is coming from and going to, is what I'm for. Councillor Hollis, so I've got your hand up there, please.
Sorry, Chair, you're going to wish I hadn't come on this committee, aren't you? I'm going to go back a bit to code 5195, debts written off. Now, are these completely written off, or are they put to one side for maybe future claiming?
Alan, would you like to answer that?
These are bad debts that have been written off. They are irrecoverable. We took them to Finance Committee in August, September, October, and there's no ways that we'll recover them. They were not raised incorrectly, or that I think in some cases they've been outstanding for years. Our chances of recovering them are insignificant. So these have been reported in the previous Finance Committees, and they have gone through to Council. They are irrecoverable.
Right, thank you.
And Councillor Brame.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, just coming back on that, to me, that's the sort of thing that ought to be seriously in red, with a comment that says, this one says, as per council approval earlier in the year. I'm not sure that people actually understand that. So if it's in a red number, it knows that we as a council chose to accept a £2,884 loss, if you like. So perhaps that's the sort of thing that should be in red, so that we can ask the question, when it's already been approved, that's fine, but these things are going to come up as we go through the year, and you know, we're going to take them to council to approve. So again, to me, that should be a red figure, because as finance, we're going to say to the full council, we can't get this money back. The cost to replace to chase it is too much, but it needs to be shown, as far as I'm concerned, in big red letters as we lost the money.
Okay. Whilst I take on board what you're saying, we have a regular agenda item, which is the review of debtors, which Alan as officer regularly provides us with a report that gives us a state of the nation in terms of the accounts, cash flow, and things that are taking a little bit longer but aren't too much of an issue, and then things that are an issue. And we do have an agenda item right at the end of the meeting, a 7820, where we will review the debtors list and consider any required action. As per financial regs, whenever we as a committee decide that we need to, those debts are unrecoverable, for example, after a decision made in another committee not to pursue monies and that kind of thing, we then make a recommendation to full council, which is often why, unfortunately, in council meetings, I sometimes stand up for a bit too long and say recommendation. And then full council actually has the final say whether that money gets written off or not. From Alan's point of view, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that he keeps a note of all the minute items where those monies have been written off, because that is also something where the internal auditors will review. And it's also been something that Alan's kept under control and has reviewed as part of his finance officer reforms that he's been doing. So I don't want to encourage you to go back through all of the old agendas and minutes, but they are there. So I think, we all have a duty of care to engage fully with all the committees and that side of things. But as you say, every day's a learning day and we're here to support. Alan, is there anything you'd like to add on that subject?
Chair, we really have been monitoring our debtors. I'm hoping that this year we will not, other than because of the COVID-19 situation around property rentals, I'm hoping that we don't actually have any bad debts. At the moment, I was reviewing debtors this morning. They are virtually insignificant. I think we've got about £1,000 of debtors that might be worrying, but we're on top of it.
If I can come back, Chair.
Yes, please.
I agree entirely with what you're saying, and I have seen you in full council in full flow and thoroughly agree with what you're saying. All I'm looking at is that when we're looking at changing this to put it in red when it's a cost, basically, that's a cost. Now, there's no minus, there's no anything. It just, the budget was to write it off. The actual was written off. It looks as if that's acceptable. Perhaps if the rest of the council, when they see our documents from finance, can see it in red, they might just look at it and say, hang on, that's a cost. That's why the chair of finance jumps up and down at us.
I think that's perhaps something that we can, with the committee's permission, we work on how we present that information perhaps for full council, and obviously in turn how we present it here, because obviously we do have it as a regular agenda item, and normally it's a lot higher up on the agenda. It is merely because there are some confidential items within it that we need to have it under the exclusion. Well, we're proposing to have it under the exclusion of press and public. So that's why it's at the end of this meeting, unfortunately. I'm really mindful at the moment. I haven't heard from Chris Harvey and I haven't heard from Dennis. Is there anything you'd like to comment on, query, please?
No, I'm really quite happy. I can understand this. I've looked through it now, and yet again, I give credit to Alan to making finance understandable for dummies.
Yeah, I'm the same with Chris. So far, I understand what's going on, and I don't have any comments. Thank you.
Okay. I'm really mindful that we have quite a large agenda. We have given this item considerable discussion. are we in a position to recommend these accounts to full council, please?
Aye.
Agree.
Agree.
So that was, do I still require a proposer and seconder, Chris? Sorry.
I propose Brenda Cannon.
I second it. Colin Burnett.
Is Mr. Crimmen still with us?
I'm sorry, I was talking into a dead microphone. Yes, I've got both proposer and seconder. We just need to see if there you can take a vote or take a vote. I'll call through and you can do it that way if you wish.
Yep, thank you.
So all in favour, first of all, Mike Brindle.
I'm in favour.
Thank you. Colin Burnett.
I'm in favour.
Thank you. Jen Hollis.
Agree.
Thank you. Brenda Cannon.
Agreed.
Thank you. Dennis Crawford.
Agreed.
Thank you. Colin Harvey.
Chris Harvey, not Colin, but yeah, I agree anyway.
Sorry, Chris Harvey. And Jane, Chair.
Agreed.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Don't I get a vote?
Oh, right, Brahim, I am sorry.
No pressure.
Right, Brahim. Thank you.
May I also ask a question?
Please.
Does talking into a dead mic means that you forget to unmute?
It does.
We'll move on to 6820, approval of payments made, to receive the listing of payments made since the last meeting. Okay, Alan, I feel like I've talked too much. Can I hand over to you?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the financial regulations, we and the bank mandate that we have, we are required to table the payments that we have made to the Finance Committee. We have two bank accounts, and we have two types of payments. We have bank payments, which are not necessarily costs that we incur on credit. They would be things like paying HMRC for PAYE, Norfolk pensions. It could be other costs. And then our supplier payments are typically those invoices that we get from our suppliers that we pay on credit. So we'd pay 20 or 30 days after payment. What we have done is there's also certain payments which are direct debits, which we also identify. And in terms of the financial regulations and the bank mandate that was approved in November, we have to indicate which payments were made by the town clerk and the deputy town clerk. And we have done that. And then we also have identified those payments that have been made by the town clerk and a councillor. And that councillor in that case was you, Councillor James. So those are all listed down. And the idea of these reports is that we don't necessarily, if you had to ask me a question, I wouldn't be able to tell you what it is, but a councillor through you, the chair, could ask for the supporting documentation, and it would be my responsibility to scan it through and send it to them for their scrutiny if you so agreed.
What I would add, Alan, is were these normal times and we were meeting face to face, Alan very kindly brings to the meetings a wonderful huge ream of paper, which is the supporting documentation that supports those attachments that he references there for all the payments, so that, you know, should you wish, you could view it in the meeting. But obviously that's not so easy given this. So if there are any queries, we're more than happy to support and facilitate that. Are there any queries on the process at this stage? Mike and Colin, I'm mindful that you can't do a hands up. So are you guys happy with how that sits in terms of process at the moment?
I'm happy to move to the recommendation.
Sorry, you both
Colin,
spoke at the same time.
Yeah.
So Mike, please.
Sorry, I may have overspoken Colin. I'm not sure. We clashed. No, I'm happy with moving to the recommendation.
Thank you. Colin?
Yeah, I agree with Mike.
Okay. Any other comments from the floor, please?
Approve the recommendation.
Okay. So the recommendation is the making of these payments be approved.
Agreed.
Agreed.
I've got the proposer. Can I have a second? I've got Brenda Cannon.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Roy. We can do the same again, Chair, if you wish.
I think that's probably easiest for clarity.
Certainly. So I'm going through. I've got you crossed out, Roy, because you left the committee last year and you come back this year. So that's why you're, but I've got you as present. So sorry. So first of all, Roy Brame.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Brendel.
4.
Councillor Manette.
4.
Councillor Hollis.
Agree.
Councillor Canham.
5. No,
Councillor
agreed.
Crawford.
Agreed.
Councillor Harvey.
Agreed.
And Councillor James.
Agreed.
So again, it's unanimous, Chair.
Super. Thank you all very, very much. So we move on to 6920, which is the feedback on internal control review. The review structure is exactly as per the financial regulations. The document is completely my fault. I apologise. But for those of you who follow the finance committee minutes, you will see that it's exactly the same almost as last year, but ultimately dates and the nuances is how we did it ultimately. Mike, as you were part of that process, is there anything you'd like to comment on at this stage on that, please?
I think I'm happy. Well, I'm going to say I'm happy with the document. Well, I would be, wouldn't I? No, there isn't anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brame, I've got your hand up, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just a protocol query. Having sort of ended up at a lot of these meetings currently, every time I have been asked to vote, I have also been asked if I was here for the full duration of what we were discussing. And because you don't know, because some people are not on camera and things, my question is, do we have to phrase the question before we vote, were you here for the full debate or not? I don't know, I've got no idea, but I'd hate somebody to say we're running these meetings and they don't comply.
My personal view, and it's obviously not that of the council or the committee, is that I would like to think that a councillor would be bold enough that if they were unable to engage with the whole meeting, they would abstain, stating, I abstain because I have been unable to engage with the whole part of this agenda item. That would be my personal view, but perhaps it is something, and I know the town clerk is listening in, would be able to have a look at, and perhaps we need to fine tune some of our meeting protocols. Would that be what we're looking for, Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I must admit, I, like you, would hope that that was the way that things are. But if people are looking at this on YouTube and wherever, I just wonder whether we need to ask the question that, you know, were you here? Because it's all very well, somebody could have popped off to make a cup of tea or whatever, and I just believe that it might be best practice that before we have any votes, we ask the councillors. I don't think it's necessarily individually. I must admit, at planning for Breckland, the chair actually says we are now going to the vote. Are there any councillors who were not here for the full debate? Would they please make themselves known? And that's the end of it. And then we go on with the vote. But it's just got to be best practice for people out there on the internet. You know, we're not as we normally would be. You know, if we're sitting around a table, everybody knows if you got up and walked away. So I just think perhaps I don't know, but I'm just asking the question.
Chair, the town clerk's put a note on. I don't think that this is a legal requirement, but it could be viewed as best practice.
Okay, so might I suggest that at this point in the meeting, if you have lost signal or haven't been able to engage fully with the discussion or hear the discussion fully, if you don't feel that you have been able to engage with the process fully, that you abstain on the vote and state that as a reason when we come to the vote. And I think the clerk will probably look at, the legal requirements, the best practice, and come up with perhaps a model code of conduct as a whole for the whole council. Is that okay with everybody?
Aye.
Yep.
Fine.
Jane, could I make a comment, please?
Please.
I appreciate what Roy's saying. I think there's a circumstance in which, because, for example, what happened to me this evening, in that through no fault of my own, I was not able to join the meeting until a certain point. If it had happened, I could have come in the middle of a meeting and been able to either make my point or to catch up with it. I think it is really then up to the councillor to decide whether they know sufficient about the item to make an informed judgment, which is, after all, what we do all the time. We try to make an informed judgment when we feel that we know sufficient. That seems to me the important criterion, not whether they've been to make a cup of tea or not. So I'm kind of a bit cautious about wanting to get too caught up in the attendance as just judging people on whether they've actually sat through the entire item or not. It's a question of whether they think that they have got sufficient information to have a balanced view that they can manage to vote on. And I think we need to trust colleagues to do that.
I think you're right, Mike. We have to trust each other, absolutely, because if we don't, we're in a very sorry place. If I may, can I actually draw us back to the agenda item, which is obviously the update on the council-led internal control review. Do we need to recommend that to full council, Alan?
I don't think so. I think if this committee accepted the fact that the review was done, I would think that that's sufficient.
Okay. Are there any questions on that agenda item, please?
Can you just remind me for the minutes that Mike Brindle was one? Who was the other two, please?
It was myself and Councillor Jeremy as the non-finance member.
Thank you very much. In
terms of best practice, we like to have a non-finance member come into it, because there's that element of challenge that they're not used to hearing this, month in, month out, and for exactly the reason that Councillor Hollis and Councillor Brame have been so good in this meeting, questioning and that kind of thing. That's exactly the role that we would expect the external councillor effectively to take on. Councillor Hollis, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will abstain on this one because I weren't party to any other finance meetings, and this is my first one. So I think it'd be totally unfair of me to comment on something that, even though I've read, I've not heard the conversation, if you like.
Noted, not a problem. Thank you very much. So do I have a proposer and seconder on this, please?
I propose it. Councillor Colin Burnett proposes it.
So that's Colin Burnett proposing. Yep. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second it. Cannon.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you. I'll go through it again then. So, Roy Brame in favour.
In favour.
Councillor Brindle.
Yes, support.
Councillor Burnett.
In favour.
Councillor Hollis, you're going to abstain.
I'm going to abstain because I've not taken part in any of the other conversation. Thank you.
Councillor Cannon.
Agreed.
Councillor Crawford.
Agreed.
Councillor Harvey,
Agree.
Councillor James.
Agreed.
That's unanimous again. Thank you.
Well, no, there was one
I
abstain.
do believe. Yes, it was 4 anyway. Yep, sorry.
Lovely. Thank you all very, very much. We move on to 7020, which is the feedback on internal audit and AGAR. To note the progress in having the 2019-20 year end completed and approved by council attached. Alan, would you like to do our starter for 10 on this, please?
Thank you, Chair. What happened is, under normal circumstances, we would be required to have our internal audit completed by 30th of June each year. Because of COVID-19, that has been extended to the 31st of July. The internal auditors have been in. They have finalised their work. Funny enough, this morning was the last queries I was given. They are on target to have their report issued by the end of June. Apparently, it goes to through their processes today and tomorrow. We will then, as the management team, will get an opportunity to comment on it, and the report will be finalised by then. In terms of the AGAR forms, we also had an extension given to us. These would normally have to be ready and sent to the external auditors by the 30th of June each year. They are only due to be submitted by the 31st of July. We have completed the forms. They were completed a little while ago. And we've done all the supporting documentation that we required to send to the external auditors. Just for the benefit of the committee, we don't actually have a full external audit. We have a limited assurance external audit. So the internal auditors come and check that all our controls were working correctly, and the external auditors review our financial documentation, and then they give an opinion on whether they're satisfied with that. One of the challenges we've had this year is that we've had to restate a number of issues because of, unfortunately, because there was poor challenges last year. Let me put it there. So whereas we reported a surplus of 3,379 last year, we found some of the errors, we ended up with an accumulated deficit of £43,444 this year. So that has had to be luckily we've made a little bit of a surplus, and we were able to use that surplus to convert that accumulated deficit brought forward to a surplus at the end of the year. We are satisfied that there's no other fundamental errors in our accounting forms, and that going forward we won't have the same challenges. It will be a requirement that the forms get approved by council, so we will, as part of that process, we'll be tabling the forms with the various governance statements at the next Finance Committee meeting towards the end of July. And that's it.
Thank you, Alan. Given that this is to note, is there any pressing questions that anybody would like to ask of Alan, please?
No, I feel that he's explained it quite well. I was a bit confused when he said on the second bullet point, but now he's explained it, it makes sense.
In that case, if there's no other questions, duly noted. Thank you very much, Alan. And we'll move on to 7120, which is the approval of reserves. So the recommended attached schedule of reserves to be approved by the full council. And I'm now frantically pulling mine up. Oh, thank you, Alan. That's awesome. Thank you so much. You're right. You're right, Roy. He is good. Alan, is there anything in particular you'd like to draw the committee's attention to at this point in time on this, please? Hello, Alan.
I think we've lost him.
No, I've been talking to a muted microphone. I do apologise. What you'll see is that what we've taken out of reserves is the same amount is basically the same amount that we've put in. We budgeted about £95,000 to be contributed to reserves, and we budgeted to take out a significant amount last year, nearly £465,000 of reserves. We realised that wasn't going to happen, and so what we've done is we funded all our projects out of reserves, and because we've done that, we've had extra money to put back into the reserves. So the movement, luckily, we put £194,000 into reserves, and we've taken out £190,000, £190,000, sorry, I'm getting too detailed, leaving a net balance of 1.3 million. So overall, we've been able to sustain our reserves.
Excellent.
Councillor Brain, please.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think this is really quite astounding that we could have managed to have done this, and for me it looks really good. Again, my only question would be for non-accountancy people. I would just ask Alan, is there any way that anything could be shown on here that he finds, I don't want to say questionable, but alarm raising? Because these are lovely reports, especially with this, when we've got the reserves, we've done everything we should have done. I just wonder whether there is any way that if he has a thought about them, there's some way that could sort of be shown up on the actual paperwork, so that it brings our eye to having a look at, because I don't think that we're half clever enough to work out whether or not there's a problem.
Alan, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you, Chair. What we started to do in February of this year is we had a meeting with the other managers, and we were looking at rationalising this and developing a reserving policy. Unfortunately, we had to put that on hold because we kind of stopped functioning as a council. And one of the things that we will be doing going forward is actually putting that back on the table. So possibly at the next meeting, we will then start putting some frameworks, because I think what we have is we've got a significant number of reserves. Their purpose is not always clear. So what we're trying to do is just elaborate that, look at the basis of contributing to reserves, and make it easier for all councillors to understand going forward. But it is a little bit of a process. Are there any concerns? I don't have any concerns. You'll see that, for example, there's a VAT contingency reserve of £40,000. That's just prudent. We'll talk about it later on in the meeting. It's just there to protect us in case we have some issues with our VAT. But otherwise, I have no concerns whatsoever.
Councillor Brindle, did you
yes, I would like to comment, please. Thank you. That was very clever of you to think that without being able to see any evidence from me. Thank you for that. I'd kind of like to go a bit the other way, I think, from Roy's comment, because I feel that I want to make a wider statement about the way in which the financial matters are being reported to us. We had an opportunity, is it as long ago as a couple of years now, to take a rather different path financially. And I think it was Tina first who had the courage to say, yeah, we can do it differently. And then it led to the appointment of Alan. And we've obviously got an effective finance officer, an effective chair of finance now. I'd like this form. I think that there's a clarity to the way the financial items are presented now that we did not have years ago. It's now, I think it is possible to see where the question should be asked by councillors, not so much by officers. for example, to take a very simple case, if we look at 3095, there's 110,000 earmarked for Cage Lane toilets. If anyone's forgotten, it's fairly obvious it's not been spent. We could ask the question, well, just update us, please, or remind us, please, why has money not been spent yet? Is it coming in the current year? Has it been delayed for some reason? I think with those figures, the table we've got there enables us as councillors to cut to the quick, to be able to say, hey, what about? Because we can see clearly what the balance is and what's been not used, as it were, over the year. Just as in previous forms, we could see what the expected expenditure was and what the real expenditure's been, and we can ask questions about why the difference. So I really want to say congratulations to Alan. I think congratulations to Tina as well, and indeed to Jane, because I feel that I now understand a great deal more easily than I could have done 2, 3, 4 years ago. As far as I'm concerned, keep up the good work.
If I may, on behalf of everybody, thank you. It's really nice to get that sort of feedback, and it was. Yeah.
Could I come back on that, Chair?
You may, and then I'll take Councillor Hollis.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with every word that Mike has said. It is lovely to have these, and there will be people who look at it, as Mike has done, and can see these things. My only thing is that there are members who are not accountancy led that may not think to ask the questions unless it's just a little bit highlighted. With what Alan said and where we're going, I think that was a perfect answer to the question, because I think as we move on, they will be highlighted. So it's with what he said and this, I think it's a marvellous, the presentation is marvellous, and I can only congratulate him.
I'll let you take that compliment, Alan. I can't keep saying thank you.
Thank you very much.
What I would also say is, in terms of one of the forthcoming agenda items, 7320, there is a focal area of in-year reporting, and unfortunately, because we didn't have the March meeting, we didn't have that paper, and I was very, very mindful that there's an awful lot on here to deal with. So it is work in progress. It is the would be better if. These are the next steps that we're going to. So as we work through this, please do. The feedback is incredibly important. I know certainly for Alan and the other officers of how we can do better. And it is about doing better. It's good now. Would be better if. And that's certainly, I think, what Councillor Brame has highlighted there, the would be better ifs. So bear with us, work in progress, watch this space. Councillor Hollis, please.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with what Mike was saying, and also Roy, to the fact, I mean, yes, I do know a bit about finance, but obviously I'm not as on the draw as yourself, Roy, Mike, or any of the others. But I have to say, I find this so easy to understand, whereas I can question things. So I think it's a well done to all concerned, Alan, yourself, Deputy, whoever's concerned in it, all the clerks. That yeah, and it's presented very well for even a novice like me to understand. So well done.
Thank you, Councillor Hollis. Councillor Cannon, please.
Yeah, I've just picked up a few things. The youth projects, have we still got them going? I just think it's highlighting things. And my biggest question is, I think it was before this one was flashed up, and it was King's House. I thought everything for King's House was going under the Stanipol.
I believe, and Alan will probably be able to correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that we do have a repairing responsibility in terms of our lease at King's House. Alan, is there something that you'd like to add to that? Because I know you've been doing a lot of work on leases.
Chair, you are correct. That is to fund our costs. At the moment, we've done some work in the council chamber, and that reserve will be used for that particular purpose. But it is in respect of Thetford Town Council. GWS have their own funds to do what they need to do with King's House.
Does that help, Councillor Canham?
It did, but I just think it's ideal to have it like this, because then you can see where you could take money from if there was a disaster. So it's ideal to know what money's where, because I'm still not sure of that youth, because that was under the youth council. It's no longer going. So what I'm saying is it's ideal to have it written like this, because then you know where the money is.
Absolutely. And ultimately, then it's the council's decision if they wish to reallocate, and that is a requirement by our financial regulations that is a full council decision if reserves need to be reallocated to be used for something else. And that's why we've brought different things back to full council in the past. And again, you've highlighted clearly an element that Alan referred to earlier, is that we need to look at all of these and go, what is that for? What are our objectives on this? When are we looking to spend this by? Because obviously, the earmarked capital reserves like Cage Lane and Castle Park toilets, we're potentially talking about, the refurbishment of those. What's that timescale? And then it feeds into, I know, discussions that Councillor Canham's had out in terms of maintenance schedules and that kind of thing. And do you do the little everyday jobs, and when do the big jobs come in? And that's about prudent financial planning and maintaining our assets. I would draw your attention to a comment that the town clerk has just made, that we had a meeting at full council about future-proofing the council chamber, and this is the money that was agreed to spend from the reserve to do the improvements as well. So we've got those elements coming through also. But absolutely, that's what we're here to do, to challenge and to support. That's our key role, to challenge and support. So thank you all so much for engaging with this so fully. Anybody else, please? I'm mindful that potentially I haven't heard from Councillor Burnett, and you're on dial-in. Is there anything you'd like to add or query, please?
The only thing I'd like to add is the fact that it's nice to hear that the committee actually seems to understand what we're talking about. It's nice to know that everyone is actually on the same page.
Thank you. And I think it's really exciting that the committee feels enabled to ask those questions. So it's really, really good. The downside is my meeting records have now completely disappeared, but I'd rather have people engage and question than just accept
things. The one thing I will say, the neighborhood plan, is that still work in progress and everything?
Okay, so if you'll recall, that was a decision several councils ago, several years ago, to create that reserve. I believe that came via the planning committee. You'll also recall the robust conversations that we had in regards to the GTP officer contribution that we were making to Breckland, and hopefully you'll recall that some of that money that's sitting in there will actually be used for that, as it benefits effectively Thetford's neighbourhood.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman. It's a shame that we seem to be wasting some of it, but there it goes. Thank you.
Could we highlight that then, Jane? Could we highlight that neighbourhood plan, that some of it's going into that somehow?
Yeah. So that's kind of the next phase that I should let Alan talk about this really, but that's kind of the next phase that we're doing. We kind of need to know where we are. And then obviously we have all the budgeted figures that are sitting in this current 2020-2021 budget, and the movements from these reserves. So the next stage is what's been budgeted to come out this year, so that when councillors are reviewing this, they can make that informed decision. So they don't go, oh, there's 43,000, for example, in the neighbourhood plan line. Well, actually there isn't, because part of that money has been committed, and we don't want to double dip into those reserves, because you can only spend it once. So the simplification has been the key part. And then I believe, Alan, would you like to mention anything about your future plans on this?
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the hard parts is that when you look at some of these reserves, they're actually earmarked. They are specific for a purpose, and it doesn't come out clearly. So part of our reform is exactly what you said, is if we can go through, work out what these reserves are there for, what are the conditions attached to those reserves, so that we can set them out to make sure that when we plan and when council are asked to make decisions, they have a good understanding of what they can or cannot do within those conditionalities. So I'm just repeating basically what you said, but I think that project will, we've taken it quite far. We just need the beginning of this year to complete it. So at the next Finance Committee meeting, hopefully there'll be a document on the table.
Chair, there is a message from Tina Cannell to say, yes, our lease at King's House is repairing. We have had a meeting at full council. You've got it?
We've covered that. Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you. Are there any other questions from the floor, please? If not, can I ask for a proposer so that we can recommend the attached schedule of reserves, because this will need to be approved by full council, please?
I'll propose that, Chairman.
I'd like to second that, Councillor Burnett.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Would you like to take the vote?
I will. I'm going to call out again. So I'm going to start with Councillor Brame.
I was here for the full discussion and I will vote for.
And unless anybody says to the opposite, I'll assume they were for the whole discussion. Councillor Brindle?
For.
Councillor Millett?
For.
Councillor Hollis?
For. I was here.
Thank you. Councillor Canham?
For.
Councillor Crawford?
For.
Councillor Harvey?
For.
And Councillor James?
For.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much, and I'm so pleased that we're having some really good, robust discussion. So if we move on to 7220, which is the approval of budget timetable for 2021 and 21-22 years, to note the attached report and recommend the attached budget timetable in the attached report to be approved by full council. Let me grab my piece of paper, because I did print these as well. So, oh, that's nearly a Gantt chart. How exciting. Any questions, please? Councillor Brindle, can I come to you? Just be mindful that you're on the phone again.
Yes, thank you very much. I think we're in a difficult position whichever way we play this. If we make up the budget earlier, or it's recommended the budget timetable be submitted to council earlier, I can understand why that's proposed. I think the opposite is also true, that we are going to make more mistakes. So we're kind of creating a situation that justifies this change. I'd be interested to know a little bit more about where the proposal has come from and whether it's widely recommended that this is a good way forward. Is there experience of it helping councils cope in a difficult situation that we can, as it were, quote or see or understand?
Obviously, there was a covering paper to that timetable. Alan, can I get you to talk the committee through, please?
Sure. What we this year, when I talk about this year, the 2019 20 year, where we started approving the budget, I found it quite a difficult task because we actually didn't have any time frames. We didn't know when we had to have certain processes done, and so the concept of this budget timetable was that we tried to put a whole lot of things into the financial regulations around timing. We have an ultimate deadline that we have to have all our information to Beckton District Council by the end of January. And if we don't get it there, we don't get a precept increase. So they'll just give us last year's precept and we won't have any influence on that. So all we've done is we've just worked backwards from that particular date. We have to set, we have a meeting in November, which is the last council meeting. We typically don't meet in December. If we haven't had an approved budget by November, we have to meet in December, and we won't have, unless we have another special meeting in January of 2021, we won't have the opportunity to get the budget timetable done. So all we've done is we've just started at the end process and just worked it through. I think this year we've also got the really high risk situation of COVID-19. What is the impact? Because we've got budgets that have revenue which we haven't earned. We've incurred more expenditures. So the budget also for this year is just taking that particular circumstance into account to ensure that we that we start quantifying that. You know, Tina gets asked, or sorry, the town clerk gets asked often, you know, what is the cost of COVID, etc. We're starting to build up that database and submit that information, and it is starting to mount up. So we don't want to go through this year with a budget that has no relationship to what we actually had in place. So the timing is always unfortunate because we end up with the budget, you know, 7 months or 6 months before we have to actually implement it. But we have no other option. Otherwise, we don't meet the timetable. So it's just the way that the legislation has been written, and it's the way that we actually have our own internal processes. I don't know if that's answered the question.
It does. I think the comment that you made that if we don't do it in time, then we don't get the precept really summarised it quite nicely. In other words, we're doing this because we have to do it.
Correct.
Thanks.
Yeah, and the town clerk has just put a note up in the chat, so obviously I need to relay that for those that are calling in and don't have access to that. She stated that this is best practice that also fits with our audit and budget programme. So again, reinforcing that timeline that effectively we have that line in the sand that is given to us in terms of that submission date to the local authority for any precept and our budget, and it's kind of working backwards. And perhaps also it reflects that we're kind of victims of our own success. Because we're making the information easier, we can actually start doing more, and mindful of things like veerments between budget lines when things don't occur as they should do, or something has changed since we have set it, you know, back in November. We need to be mindful of those, and we have had a couple of occasions where we've moved money from one line to another with the council approval. So it's kind of just giving a format and an outline to it, and it's also sort of a ready reckoner as well that supports the committees. So for example, number 8, committees formal revision of fees and tariffs. So if they review those fees and tariffs, that then forms into the budget setting process. So I think the intention is to be a supportive document rather than a dictating document. Does that help as well?
I just found it was a working document, to be honest with you.
It is very much kind of, it's August, what do we do? Oh yeah, we need to do that in terms of. Any other questions from the floor, please? Colin, is there anything you'd like to?
No, I'm quite happy with the way things are.
Anything else, please? In that case, the recommendation is that the Finance Committee approve the attached timetable and recommend its adoption to Council. Do I have a proposer for that recommendation?
Yes, Mike Brindle would be pleased to propose or second if that was Dennis proposing.
Yeah, cheers, man.
Yep, so we have Dennis proposing and Mike seconding.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, folks.
If we could move to the vote, please, Chris, that would be wonderful.
Councillor Brame.
Yes.
Councillor Brindle.
4.
Councillor Burnett.
4.
Councillor Hollis.
Agree.
Councillor Canham.
4.
Councillor Crawford.
4.
Councillor Harvey.
4.
And Councillor James. Thank you.
4. Thank you all for that. So what we now need to do is move on to item 7320, which is the updating of the finance officer reforms to update the committee on the status of improvements to the accounting function tabled at previous committee meetings, as well as the new reforms. So we have a lovely table there. Alan has been rag rating in terms of red means little or no progress, unfortunately. Amber means started but still being developed, implemented. Green would be good progress made, nearly or fully implemented. That then disappears. It only appears on that item once, and then we'll come off of there. So, we save the trees and save the electricity in terms of producing it.
Mhm.
Alan, obviously we've had quite a bit of discussion that has linked into this. Would you like to brief the councillors further?
I have remembered to switch on my microphone. Thank you, Chair. I think really what we've done is we're trying to improve the in-year reporting. That's been one of the big projects that we've done. And the budgets is part of that, and the ordering and the buying is part of that. And so we have been focusing on those particular areas. Progress has been a little bit slow. We've got a new IT system in. We don't have that much history available. But generally, the unfortunate thing is that we don't talk about what we've actually done, and we have done a lot. And these are just the tail ends that we've got to sort out. VAT is an issue that got held up by COVID. We would have had that finished. We have to have it done by the 7th of August, because that's when we submit our next VAT return, and we have to have all the correct figures for that. So that's a pressing requirement. Our in-year reporting is possibly the biggest focus area, because the committee start meeting early in the month. I sometimes have to have the report for personnel or ALP or VEM quite early in the month. So we have to have really good accounting, because we don't want to give committees incorrect information, and then 2 or 3 weeks later that information is outdated because we've actually done a lot more processing. So these projects, some councillors might think that we haven't made any progress. I'd like to allay their fears. Each one has got an action plan. COVID-19 hasn't been helpful, so I don't want to use that as an excuse. But the one thing that we have managed to do is we are up to date on our accounting. So the bank recon was done today. Yesterday's transactions were done. We are not behind in any processing, and we've still managed to do the year end and implement certain things. So it really is just a chart. Like I said, it doesn't tell us what we've done. It just tells us what we've still got to do.
Thank you, Alan. I'd like to open the floor for questions, please. Colin, is there anything you'd like?
No, you made it quite clear.
Fantastic. Mike?
No, I think Arnold's kept us well informed month by month at meetings, so I'm well up to date with this, and I'm enjoying looking at the various colour schemes on a black and white screen. I'm sorry, Roy, that's not a dig at you. I'm quite happy to have colour, but it's a bit like there was a classic case, wasn't there, of a snooker commentator in the days when we were changing to colour TV, and he said, for those with a black and white screen, the red ball's the one behind the brown.
I remember it.
Actually, Mike, he said behind the blue, which is normally where red is.
I'm glad to hear you've had a misspent youth, Roy.
Behind the blue.
And if we bring that back to the update in the finance
Sorry.
forms. Councillor Canham.
I was just going to say I like this idea because it's something that you can keep an eye on. So, at the next meeting, we can see this again. And what I do like is that because each committee will have an update every month and it'll be right, we're not going to overspend on our budgets because we will know where we are. Because sometimes in the past, we've gone to committee and we think we've still got this money, but we haven't actually spent it. And we've realised afterwards. So, good way of doing it.
Glad you appreciate it. Councillor Hollis?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I like this system. I must admit, the traffic light system's good. It highlights everything. No, I'm all right. I completely understand. Alan's explained it very well. Thank you.
Excellent. Councillor Crawford, are you all
Yeah.
right there?
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, I am there. Yeah, no, I've got used to the system in some previous lives I've had, and I think it's very good. I am a bit concerned that our first red, we've been discussing that for a considerable amount of time now, and it's still red. But as Alan said, we are moving forward, so well done in the ordering.
Yeah. And I think, to be perfectly honest, there's been more pressing, urgent items that needed to be dealt with before we got to that one.
Absolutely, Chair.
But yeah, when it's all green, we won't have a piece of paper. That'll be nice.
Yeah.
Councillor Harvey.
Yes, I'm still here.
Excellent.
No, I've no issues. I must admit, I've been reading this through, and one of the things that worried me a bit was this facial recognition clocking system on the staff timesheets on the finance reforms. Isn't that a bit much for a small amount of staff? Hello? What's happening?
I think it sort of says it was investigated. Is there any update in terms of clocking systems? Has there been, or has COVID sort of put a halt to that side of things as well, Alan?
COVID has, what we were looking at is instead of having cards and thumbprints and everything else, we found a solution that was facial recognition. It would take 1 second. It would register you being there, and it would work perfectly. But we having to, post COVID-19 and having to work safely, we're not going to have everyone coming to necessarily to 2 locations all the time. So we have put it on the hold. We have to wait and find out what the new working kind of arrangements will be, and then we need to look at it. But the key driver of our behavior is not to be FBI or MI5 or MI6. It really was to make it simple to get the timesheets done, because when it comes to things like calculating annual leave, getting the timesheets approved, processing them, we spend a considerable amount of time doing it, and all these systems that we were looking at was just to make that easier and more accurate. So that was our driving force. And if there's a better solution than facial recognition that's that's not costly, we would have pursued that as well. But it's all in flux at the moment until we know what our new working kind of patterns will be.
Is that okay, Chris?
Yes, yeah, that's okay.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, I looked at it from a different way, and I would now ask a question. If we actually get this sort of thing going, does that help with lone working and safety for the staff, so that we know which staff is where and everything else? Rather than a sort of a negative, I wondered if it had a positive connotation that we could use.
I think, we do have systems, but it also has that benefit. It helps us, it also doubles up as a visitor registration system. So there are those benefits, because at the moment, we have to manually show cards when we come into the office. If we had facial recognition, it would automatically register when we left the building, for example. So there are positives, but like I say, we've had to put all of this on hold because of the situation we're in.
Excellent. Any other questions, please? Just to pick up on your point, Councillor Brame, the town clerk has said yes, it provides that function as well. So just confirming what Alan has said there. I do have a query myself, Alan. It's on other projects and again under that staff timesheets and monitoring of annual leave. You've popped on there that leave on variable hour contracts will be paid out on a quarterly basis going forward. Will that be still adopting the new requirement to calculate over a 52-week reference period?
Chair, I have had a look at that. There is HMRC's guidance and ACOS's guidance on certain things say that they don't actually provide guidance. All they say is that you have to ensure that you pay the equivalent of 5.8 weeks or 5.2 weeks or 28 days. So we have to have a look at it. But the reason what challenges us is that we might have someone that comes in and does, a few weeks work and then never comes back until 6 or 7 months later. So we're keeping them on the payroll, and it's quite difficult to keep monitoring that. So what our intention is that if we think that they finished, we would actually pay them more staff leave, so that if they left to go, just say, assume that you had an individual that was working for us on a part-time basis, they then went and got another job, we'd be able to get a P45 to them quite soon, rather than have to wait another month to process their leave up to that date. So, it's a little bit of a catch-22 situation. But I have to admit, until you pointed it out, I didn't realize that the guidance had been issued. And there is guidance that helps us with the rest of our staff, because we don't have not all our staff work 37-hour contracts. So that guidance has been very useful. So I can thank you for bringing that to my attention, because I did have to do some more homework on it.
I have to confess it's only because I've done my own CPD just recently and realised that I had to get up to date and did a load of it. Yeah, it is for the rest of the committee. The focus on the calculation is very much the contractual earnings rather than basic pay. And it used to be that you used to kind of work it out over a previous 12-week cycle, and the guidance now and the requirement is that it's done over a longer period. So it's more reflective, especially where Alan has said that those working patterns fluctuate. So hopefully it evens them out. Yeah, and it's good for our staff, because it means to say that they are paid fairly when they do take leave. Any other questions on the reforms, please? In that case, thank you very, very much, Alan, and duly noted, and looking forward to some green soon. If we move on to 7420, correspondence to be noted and considered. Have we had any, Alan, please?
I must remember to unmute. No, Chair, other than what I mentioned about the AGAR forms, that the timetable has been revised.
Excellent, yes, and we obviously will need to be mindful of that in terms of what you've already put up on there. Brilliant, thank you. I've got in my head electricity, and for some reason, why have I got electricity in my head?
The contracts are up for renewal in September, and we just need a framework to investigate to what extent do we go green energy. The town clerk has indicated that we're going to be under more pressure as a town council to make sure that we green, and it's just that we need to start considering that, because those, like I said, those contracts come up for renewal quite shortly.
Okay. Are you sure that it's not because the chair is looking for curly hair?
No, I'm certain that I'm starting to get millions of phone calls from brokers all offering us our services because they have access to the database, and they're all looking for their commission. That's why we're aware of it. The comments about the green tariffs, I didn't quite understand, so I won't comment further.
Yeah, we've kind of melded two agenda items. I apologise there. 7520, the committee officers update. So as we've got clearly written there, electricity, gas and contracts up for renewal in September. Obviously, we do have an environmental policy. We did review the environmental investments previously. Councillor Crawford, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. On the renewal of the thing and thinking about the green thing, it's always nice if we can improve our carbon footprint or some way. But do we still have an obligation to get the best deal financially rather than just taking into consideration of greening?
I would suggest that we have a responsibility to today's taxpayer and potentially the taxpayer of the future, and therefore our residents of the future. The town clerk has just popped up a comment within the chat saying council's climate crisis initiatives are starting to be looked at again nationally, and we did put going green in the strategy. So I think in terms of reviewing the contracts, which we will have to do, we need to consider them and consider them sensibly, and see what the impact is of those green tariffs. And to be honest, until Alan starts going through that process, we're not going to have anything. So I would suggest that that's a specific agenda item, perhaps for the next meeting. And the town clerk has also commented that if it's not the cheapest, we do have to justify why we need to do this. And councils will soon be required to report on their carbon footprints, which ultimately could be part of that justification. So I think that's going to be a really, really good discussion point on the next agenda item, a future meeting. Does that help?
Could I just ask a quick question here then?
Oh, yes, please.
Is this the job of finance, or does this belong to a committee? Is this the finance's responsibility?
My understanding is that this is finances. I'll defer to Alan and the town clerk.
I think part of what we're trying to do is get a centralized contracts system going, because it has an impact on all our buying decisions, whether it's leasing a vehicle, etc. So at the moment, we have probably made an assumption that it's finance. So there is an informal notification, but I also see the town clerk has put some comment there to say that it definitely is finance. I don't have the institutional history to be able to confirm it.
I think because it's strategic across so many aspects of the full council, that it sort of sits within the finance remit. Councillor Brain, please.
Thank you, Chair. I couldn't agree with you more. The only thing I would add to that, if possible, I don't know whether we can make it a recommendation that all other committees have this as an agenda item. It is something that as a council, amongst other councils, we've all got to do. We've all got to look at becoming as green as possible. We have to look after the planet. So it may well be that, yes, it comes under finance because it's the electricity bill, the gas bill, whichever. But all other committees can have a great deal of input on how we save as much of the electricity that we use, and how they can come up with ideas to be as green as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Brain. You're absolutely correct. The town clerk has just put up that, yes, it covers all committees, so sits with finance as the strategic committees. We do have an environmental strategy in place that puts that emphasis on the committees in terms of what they need to do and how they need to do it and their considerations. And I believe, if I remember correctly, that there were certain parts that also formed part of the corporate strategy as well. So all feeds into that. But you're absolutely right. It is a subject that is very, very important to our residents. We are very lucky that we live in the middle of a Thetford forest, but everybody is mindful of the impact that they are having on the environment. So thank you. Any more questions or queries on the specifics regarding the electricity and gas contracts? In that case, is there anything else that you'd like to add to the committee officers update there, Alan?
No, Chair, that's everything.
Super. So
Yeah,
we look forward.
just remind you, Chair, that we're just coming up to 2 hours. You might like to suspend standing orders if possible.
I don't think it would be appropriate to suspend standing orders. It would be appropriate to suspend standing order 3, subsection CC, which actually states that a meeting shall not exceed a period of 2 hours. That is my proposal, that we suspend that specific standing order, because otherwise, if we suspend them all,
Okay.
all hell will break loose. So my proposal is that we suspend standing order 3CC, that a meeting shall not exceed a period of 2 hours. I am mindful that we started late, but there are a number of items still on the agenda that we need to cover. I propose that we suspend that standing order. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second it.
Councillor Harvey, I'll second that.
Everybody seconded. All those in favour?
Aye.
Agreed.
Aye.
Agreed.
Abstain.
You'd like to abstain, would you, Councillor Brindle?
No, I'm in favour of carrying on.
No, Councillor Burnett.
So we are in favour of suspending standing order 3CC. There are no objections or abstentions.
Thank you.
Super. Thank you all very, very much. We will then move on to 7620, which is on your screens in front of you. Well, some of you. Community engagement, to discuss and agree any consultation on media release required. Alan has kindly put a note about the exercising of public rights to inspecting accounting records. Alan, could you update us on that? Because that's a different date to normal.
Thank you, Chair. Typically, we would have to put a notice out for 30 days that includes the 1st of July, and that enables the public to inspect the records if they so desire. It sets out the process for doing that. In terms of the new legislation or the temporary legislation, that date has now been extended to the 1st of September. So all local governments around the country have to put this notice up. It has to be displayed for 30 days, and it has to include the 1st of September. So if last year some vigilant ratepayers knocked on the council door and said we hadn't displayed it on the right date, if they do so this year, please bear in mind that it is the 1st of September, not the 1st of July.
If I may, Alan, if my memory serves me correctly, there's normally a lovely template form that we have. Will that be provided as usual, but with the change of dates and perhaps an explanation on that?
It will be. I must admit, it is part of the document that we get sent. I haven't looked at it, but I will. If we have to put an explanatory note, I'll ensure that we do so.
Excellent. And obviously that is a legal requirement, so...
Correct.
Can I ask a question there, please?
Oh, of course, Councillor Canham, sorry.
That notice obviously go onto the Town Council website, but could I just ask, I know in some organisations that if they asked for them, that they had to pay for them. Is that still true? If they asked us to send them to them?
No, we do not send them out. The public has a right to inspect the accounting records. They do not have the right to be sent the accounting and are required to be as per the
oh my god. Are we more proud of your rating? Shit show, dude. Absolute shit show.
Joe, you're unmuted at the moment.
Yeah, Tina's just said that they can come in the office and look at them.
And that has to be at a mutually convenient time. And obviously, we need to be mindful as well what happens from the 1st of September in terms of the current COVID situation. So, yeah, adapt and overcome, as usual, will be the order of the day on that. Is everybody happy with that?
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Any other consultation or media releases required, do we think, from our discussions today? I don't believe so.
No.
Chair, if I may come in on that, it's not on our discussions today, but as it's community engagement, I just wonder if we could actually get out there that it's actually Swift Week from the 27th to the 5th of July. Might be something that Thetford Town Council might like to do. I have sent some papers in about a Swift Tower and various other bits and pieces. I honestly believe that going back to 7520 and the green infrastructure and what we need to do, this is something that Thetford should look at and possibly get out there, that it's very important that we support the Swifts.
I, like you, Councillor Brame, enjoy watching the swift swallows and house martins fly above my house and in the area. Please don't ask me to identify which one's which. I fail at that one and always have had. I would suggest that I'm sure the countryside officer would love to receive that information, and obviously that could form part of the ALP agendas as that deals with outside areas. So thank you for raising that. If there's nothing else on the community engagement side of things, I move to agenda item 7720, which is the exclusion of press and public. And I request that the committee considers resolving that pursuant to the Public Bodies Admissions to Meetings Act 1960, the press and public be excluded for any remaining items of business on the grounds that publicity would be prejudicial to the public interest by reason of the confidential nature of the business to be discussed. The reason that we have this on the agenda is we are specifically speaking in terms of the debtors list and the context regarding the suggested actions that may be required. Are we all in favour?
I'll second your proposal, Chair.
Sorry?
I'll second your proposal, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown.
Chair, I've stopped the meeting.
Agree.
The recording. I've stopped the meeting recording.
Thank you very much. And I've said, I've got on my screen, recording has been saved, recording has stopped. Thank you so much. So, right, breathe now. Okay, so we move on to 7820. Yeah, sorry, was there any objections to that exclusion of press and public, even though we've pressed stop now?